Jo.
I connect to my laptop to you?
Yeah, you can connect it with VGI. We have HDMI and this.
All right.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh.
Excuse me, what presentation do you have?
The over. I have time, not now.
Yeah, okay,
Just
so,
checking
yeah.
if I have everything I need.
Yeah. Jdeme takto. Musíme ho najít, no. Snad.
This is the right one.
Yeah, this is the right one.
Maybe it's better.
Oh, jo. Víc nevadí.
Ten nejvyšší.
Jo, to je možná lepší, no. Tak jo, počítač 1, jo? Aha. Počítač 1 tady dá, jo, jasně.
I won't. Maybe I can kill it. Finally.
We're going to get started here in a couple minutes just to give people some time to show up. Kubernetes upstairs. 106. Right there. Okay, everybody, I'm going to start. I don't have a full entire 50-minute or 40-minute talk, so there's good time for some questions at the end. Welcome to delivering open source projects, of course. Seriously? Let me fix that before it does it again. Great, welcome everybody. Welcome to delivering open source projects with Agile DevOps thinking. My name is Jen Krieger, and I'm an Agile Coach with Red Hat's platform business. Is everyone good? Okay, sound good? Hello? Does it sound okay? Hello? Yeah? Okay, all right. Okay. Apparently I don't talk loud enough. That's okay.
And when there will be a question, can you please repeat the question?
Yes.
To be on the recording.
Yep, I will. So I'd like to start my talk by sharing a little bit about me. I've been in software development for about 15 years, and I consider myself pretty lucky for that because I absolutely love technology. I met my first computer in 1984. It was a compact portable, and my dad brought it home from work, and I thought it was the best thing ever. Several years after that, he brought home Windows 3.1, and I explicitly told him that there would be no one on the planet that would actually use that. I was a hardcore command line DOS user, and I just did not understand this point and click thing. I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I was certain I was going to go to school and become a vet. But somehow I ended up in software. So essentially what happened is I joined a finance company in Miami, and that's where I basically learned pretty much all that I know today about software development. I learned essentially the terrible, terrible slog through waterfall projects. I learned what not to do, what to do, and I also had my first experience with Agile and the freedom that Agile brought to software development. And even though I was seriously grateful for those experiences, I also felt that there was just something missing. Our software was very tightly coupled, which meant that if we updated one module in the software, we had to update everything. We had absolutely no automated testing, which meant that it took us months and months and months to determine whether or not a change was actually, adequate. Welcome. Hello, guys. And we valued proprietary software over everything else, which meant every time we were trying to use a tool to solve a problem, there was a gigantic software bill associated to that no one wanted to pay. So in 2012, I joined Red Hat in their IT department as a portfolio manager. And I did that for a period of time. And after that period of time, I got this exciting offer to move over to the operations side of the department with a team called Inception as their product owner. And what Inception's mission was essentially to drive continuous integration and deployment across the department from the point of view of enabling DevOps. It was pretty exciting, and our mission essentially was to speed up the development or speed up the deployment of software. And it was through that experience that I saw for the first time an actual, true, live, continuous integration and deployment model using container software. And as a person who has seen software development for the years that I have, it was my first time actually seeing those practices and principles in place live, and it was truly a transformational experience for me. Building what I learned there, I moved over to Red Hat Platform Business Unit in early November, and with the goal of basically taking what I've learned in Inception and the practices that I know from Agile, hoping to help the rest of the company, especially in engineering, learn how to be more agile. So right now I'm an Agile coach for the Application Infrastructure Program. I will refer to App Infra probably several times in the, it's just an acronym for what we use for describing the projects that we're developing currently, which are Docker, Cockpit, Project Atomic, and Kubernetes. So what is an Agile coach? Many people have their own ideas, and I get asked this question a lot at Red Hat. Simply put, we basically mentor, we facilitate conversation, we're evangelists, and we're trainers. And it really depends on what the individual team needs. What I like to think of this as is basically, my role is to make sure that everybody who is on the team from end to end has what they need in order to be successful. So it's basically whatever they need is what I'm going to do. Or more simply put, Agile is about empowering people to do their work, or to do their best work to fulfill their potential. Currently, Red Hat is using Agile to deliver on those aforementioned projects. And today I'm going to share a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it looks like today. So the good. Team structure. So earlier I mentioned we were contributing to 4 distinct products. Currently to do that we have 9 teams and about averaging 8 to 9 people per team. We also have QE support, we have documentation support, we have a program manager who is in the room, we have 2 product managers, and we also have other supporting roles. So we have a plethora of people, and essentially every department at Red Hat in the Product and Technologies division has some responsibility in this effort. We do. This program really does not suffer from the lack of finding people to help do what we need to do. And this is not a typical experience for software development, especially in closed source. You typically have like 5 people, if you're lucky, if you're funded to get stuff done. The technology. So frankly, straight up, this technology is the coolest technology I have ever seen in my life. And that's saying a lot. I enjoy getting paid to work in this space, and so do the people on the team. So hopefully this weekend you will attend some sessions that will kind of excite you and explain why we are so lucky to be working in this space. I want to share that one of the developers recently came to me and told me that they were so thrilled to be included in this program because they felt that it was going to be transformational for their career long term. And I can't help but agree with them. Being able to say that you're working on container technology today, even if you aren't getting paid to do so, if you have something that you can show, will pretty much guarantee that you will have a job somewhere eventually, sometime. I like to consider myself a frustrated Agilist. And what that means to me is essentially that I've always felt that there was something missing in Agile. If you've experienced Agile, the movement really focused on developers to begin with, but to me it wasn't really intended to be that. It was supposed to be pretty much the end-to-end vision of delivering software to your customers. So it was supposed to include the business folks, it was supposed to include marketing, it was supposed to include operations, it was supposed to include everyone, security, architecture, all those people. But in reality, what winded up happening is we focused on development because we thought that was where the bottleneck was. So developers kind of had their movement. And I guess the rest of the people probably felt a little sore about that. And basically what came out of that was what we now call is the DevOps movement. And essentially for me, and everybody has their own definition of that, right? You can go online and you can type in DevOps and you can find 5,000 pages of what DevOps means to somebody. But essentially what it means to me is that it's really that we have asked teams to essentially develop and deliver so fast that our current technology just can't support that. And in order for us to meet those demands, we had to automate more. And in order for us to do that, we had to change our focus from constantly delivering to the customer to say, what about our internal structures going on today that just isn't moving fast enough? And to do something about that. So the drive to become faster, to deliver working software, made it critical for teams to actually have automation. And that new class of software, that is what I find to be so incredibly exciting. So Red Hat culture. If you work at Red Hat or if you've heard about Red Hat, everything you've heard about Red Hat is generally true in the engineering department. And in case you missed those certifications from my intro slide, I am not an engineer. I'm a project manager by trade. And so you all probably have experienced interactions with a project manager program, portfolio manager in the past, and typically what winds up happening is they poke you exactly at the wrong time in the middle of while your head's deep in code and ask you for a status. Or they invite you to a meeting that you attend and they're not really sure why you were even there, right? Standard project manager. So there's a general stigma for being Ludic is telling me that I am correct. So there's a general stigma attached to being a product or a project manager. And the reason why I bring this up is because I was expecting that when I moved over to engineering because, gosh, everybody's an engineer in engineering. And I expected people to be like, who are you? Why are you bothering me? Just leave me alone. I've got something better to do. The reality is that actually wasn't the case. Pretty much everybody I interact with are like, they're basically like, please help us. We need help. We have the best intentions at heart. And we just need guidance to understand what it is that we are doing wrong or to understand how we can improve ourselves for the better. So having that open arm welcome has been pretty awesome for me. It's been pretty great. And it kind of sets the stage for how everybody interacts together with the team. So if you have 90 some odd developers and you're constantly adding new people all the time, that means that that open arm accepting culture is extended to everyone participating, which is really great. And the most important part to me about the culture is that people are always welcome and interested in having a joke. There's lots of joking going on because when you're stressed out, the only way that you can potentially deal with that stress in any sort of meaningful way is to make a joke. And on that note, this was one of the first things that Dan Walsh said to me when I met him for the first time in December. That Agile thing, if it ever takes off. And if you've met Dan, he's got a very thick Bostonian accent, and you can maybe ask him to say this later, but I was just sitting in the chair going, is this 2001? So if you missed it, the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001, and it's now 14 years later. So for the most part, I'm pretty sure someone somewhere is practicing Agile. So let's talk about the bad. What Agile is or is not. So Agile practice at Red Hat is generally a young practice right now. There are some divisions in Red Hat that are practicing Agile. Our OpenShift team does a really fantastic job of it. For the most part, the entire IT department is using Agile to deliver internal projects. But for an engineering side, it's pretty still a young practice. What I would say is that it's generally true for most companies who are starting out in Agile is that they don't really have a good common understanding of what it is and what really it is not. So to highlight that fact, I went across the organization and I asked a couple of people what they thought Agile was. And here are some of the responses I got. So the first one is, Agile is all about 2-week sprints. We can't commit to that. So Scrum is about 2-week sprints. Agile is not about 2-week sprints. There are a lot of other frameworks inside of Agile that actually talk about different ways to deliver work. For example, Kanban actually suggests that a continuous flow of work is better than a time box work like Scrum. So there are different flavors and different things that you can apply that don't necessarily have to be as rigid as a 2-week sprint. It can't be distributed for it to work. That doesn't work for my global team. So what I'd like to say here is it'd be really nice if one of you in the room could go out and develop that teleportation technology that somebody promised me would be around by now. But since it's not likely to be anywhere in the near future, what I would like to suggest is that you kind of have to go with the person who you want and where they're living, where they're choosing to live. And that essentially means that global companies have global teams. And it's just a fact. It's not going to change. You can't relocate your entire Brno office to the United States because you think that Agile is the right way to do a software development project. It's just not going to happen. It's not financially sound, nor would it be really happy for the folks living in Brno. They probably don't want to move. So instead of focusing on, you must be all in the same room together to do Agile, focus instead on the fact that not being in the same room together actually will create some challenges. For example, time zone issues. You all have them. Like I think most of the folks who are in Brno at Red Hat seem to have a very heavy afternoon of meetings because they're accommodating the folks in the US who are starting their day or starting their job for the day. And you know, likewise, the folks in the US also have a pretty busy morning. So what I like to suggest to people is just to be sensitive of those issues and to understand that because you're not all in the same room, excuse me, and because you can't just get up and walk over to somebody's desk, you have to at least be sensitive to the fact that you might have to work a little bit harder to communicate with the people who are on your team. And then also work a little harder to include that person who isn't in that central office. So if you are on an open source project and you're the only one who is like in the middle of India and everybody else is kind of central in Europe, you might feel a little disincluded from maybe some of the activities they're doing. So it's really important for that team who is central to make sure that that person who's off on the side feels included. And it's a normal human thing to feel that way. And in my experience, it's not impossible. On the Inception team, we had an individual working in New York City. And even though we were all in the Red Hat office in Raleigh, North Carolina when we first started, he moved up to New York City, so we had to work harder to actually have that interaction. Estimating any unit of work just does not make sense. It's never accurate, and I don't see the value behind estimation. This one stings for me, and the reason why that is because in my experience, estimations have generally been used as a stick. So, for example, why did you estimate that much amount of time? So-and-so over here said it's half the amount of time. Or you took 10 more hours than you said you were going to. What is wrong with you? Sound familiar? So that's generally what that's what people feel like they should do with estimation. For me, estimation is really a tool for a team. It's not really intended to be shared out or used by other people as that stick. It's supposed to be a tool for your product owner to be able to do simple, basic math to see whether or not it's likely that they'll have certain features delivered by a certain period of time. And I've seen this done, and I've done it very successfully in the past, where you have a list of maybe 15 features, and you know reasonably certain that the top 5 are going to get delivered by the time you think you actually need them by. And then maybe the last 5, you're like maybe 10% sure that you might get them. So you'll be able to communicate that to your customers, communicate that out to people who are interested in what you're working on. Stand-up is stupid. Yeah, this one makes me laugh because on memo list, I think when I first joined, there was a rousing, like, terrible discussion about what stand-up was and how it just did not work for a global company. And a lot of people made some really great suggestions, but stand-up can be stupid, especially for distributed teams, because you could have a stand-up where one team is starting for the day and the other team is leaving for the day. So sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to actually, ask somebody what they're going to do for the day if they have only got like an hour left of their day. But it really is just supposed to provide context for members. And if it goes on for a very long time, like I see individual teams, especially new teams in Agile, tend to schedule their stand-up for about 30 minutes. It's way too long. The point is that you're just supposed to do a touch base with the people on your team very quickly, just to say, hey, this is what I'm working on, and I need some help over here. It's just a way to communicate. It's not really intended to be much of anything else. So for me, Agile is not about inflexibility. And I like to tell people that it's really just a bag of tricks that you pull from continuously for the problem that you're having, for the context that you're having, and you apply it until you find out what works for your team. And what works for your team could change over time. So something that you thought worked really well may not work in a week from now or may not work in a year from now. So you just need to continuously inspect and adapt your process so that you understand what you're doing. So open source versus Agile. And let's talk a little bit about the inflexible understanding of what open source and Agile and the integration of those two ideas looks like together. So I talked a little bit about face-to-face communication earlier, and I don't know how many of you have the experience of working on an open source project where everybody that you're working with is in the same room. I think that's probably a pipe dream and unlikely. And oftentimes you'll hear Agile people saying things like, if you are not in the same room, if you can't have face-to-face communication, you can't be Agile. And I prefer a little bit more of a flexible and relaxed attitude to that. And the way that I tell people is I've got like a prioritized list of communication methodologies that I like to suggest. This is the order. I say face-to-face communication is the best way to communicate with people. It's high bandwidth. You get that visual contact. You can see people's expressions. You can see when you're saying something that maybe they don't understand. And I say if you can't have face-to-face communication, use video conference. We're lucky now today that in 2014 there's many different options. When I first started Agile in 2008, there were no options. So a lot of times I had to use the phone. And phone is the next option. Last option, IRC or email. And I all know that most of open source communities love IRC and email. And I will tell you that I observe that IRC conversations, 9 times out of 10, when you're talking about something technical, can go south pretty quickly if you really don't have that contextual, like, personal relationship with that person. So do yourself a favor if you notice that you are consistently having a misunderstanding or disagreement with a certain individual. Stop and ask yourself, okay, is there something that I can do to change that? And it can be as simple as picking up the phone and making that personal connection with that person. And don't be surprised if your Scrum Master or Agile Coach calls you out on it if you don't do that. So Agile team autonomy. I like to think of that as the idea that an Agile team owns their entire product from end to end, so from ideation to production. And we all know that in an open source community, that's actually not a thing that an Agile team can own. So there's various steps along the pipeline that an Agile team could potentially get blocked by the open source community, for example, upstream commits. So for example, what happens when you find a bug in Atomic host and you're looking at this bug and you realize that it actually needs to get fixed in RHEL. So we all know that RHEL does not deliver every 6 weeks. That would probably be a disaster for customers if we were asking them to upgrade their RHEL systems every 6 weeks. So the person who finds that bug in Atomic host is either then forced to carry a patch, which it's not a good idea, or to wait for RHEL to fix the bug, which could be a very long time depending on the queue of other bugs that are out there. So at the end of the day, an Agile team can spend a gigantic amount of time putting work into a design, putting work into a code to find out when they send that code up to the community that either they have to refactor it or they have to redesign it completely from scratch. And those are just realities that you have to live with on an Agile team. So what I suggest is that always understand that there could be additional work associated to that code commit, and there has to be additional communication that you may need to do with the people waiting for that functionality to say, you know what, the code is complete, but we're waiting for the community to either merge it or to accept it or to, give us approval or for it to even pass unit testing at the community upstream. So there's lots of ways to handle that. Currently at Red Hat, what we're doing is we're tagging the work that we submit upstream that we're waiting for. We also have an additional board that we track all the stuff that we're waiting for so that we understand where it is in the process and what do we need to do in order to actually get that done. Now, the reason why that's important is because tagging allows us to create aging reports in which we can see how long something sits somewhere, or potentially take that responsibility of follow-up off an engineer onto a Scrum Master or a Program Manager so that they can ping saying, hey, this isn't done yet. Is there something that we can do to kind of speed up that process?
Thanks.
So, yeah, Glee.
Challenge on your list there for open source versus Agile.
Yeah?
Which is, I like your.
Yeah, such do cry.
The imbalance between a team that's at high bandwidth, maybe face-to-face or video conferencing, and also working full-time on the project versus open source contributors who are very interested but maybe are doing it as a 10% thing or after work. But that imbalance gets really hard to manage.
Yeah, I have some information that applies to that in the ugly. So,
okay.
Yeah, right? So such sad do cry. This is one of my favorite memes, just so you guys know. Our Agile tool chain. So the sad story at Red Hat is that we love software. Remember earlier when I said we bumped into a mountain of software and continuous integration and saw this great pipeline come about. And I think even on a slide earlier, there was like so many software choices that I couldn't actually read all the names. So we love downloading software, we love installing software, we love using software, we love everything about software. What we don't like about software is that we don't like actually documenting what software does. We don't like integrating our software, so we don't like to make sure that one software tool connects to another software tool. And we don't really like defining the process that surrounds a tool or maybe even the best use case for a tool. So let me share a story about what a day looks like for somebody on the App Infra program. So I'm going to talk about my coworker, Amanda. Amanda is the team lead for our Team 5, our internal tooling team. And essentially, Amanda's team is responsible for release engineering or release management for the program. Her team is they're absolute rock stars, and they do everything fast and really fantastic. So it's great that we have them. And as a wonderful reward, this is what her day looks like from a tooling perspective. She logs into work. She opens up Jira, which is the department's, for her side of the department, her tool of choice for ticket tracking, for documentation, all that kind of great stuff. She goes in, opens up a ticket, types in what she knows needs to get done for the day, and as she's typing that in, she realizes that there probably is something underlining this that it needs to get resolved by an upstream maintainer, and she knows the only way that she can get that done is not by pointing that person to the ticket in Jira, but by creating a Bugzilla that has the information that they need so that they can get their work done in their work stream. So she logs into Bugzilla and takes all the information that she just entered into Jira and retypes it into Bugzilla and fills out the form and sends it up. Then she remembers that her Agile coach is going to complain if she does not keep that information that she's working on in our centralized sprint tracking tool, which is Trello. So Trello is a Kanban tool that we use to basically define what it is that we're working on as a team. And we also roll up all that work so that we understand what it is that we're working on, from a high-level point of view. So Amanda then duplicates that information for the third time in Trello. So it has, a spot on the reporting. And as she's doing that, she gets a ping from Bugzilla, and she realizes that the upstream committer has indicated that the problem actually isn't in his product. It's over in some other upstream tool that is not in Red Hat. But he's given her a GitHub link to the repo, and she can go ahead and put her issue over there. So she goes, okay, if I need to get this resolved, I'm going to have to go enter an issue in GitHub. So she logs into GitHub, and she reproduces the information for the 4th time. So that is the terrible, terrible story of how Agile looks from a tooling perspective in our department today. It's a cringeworthy story in my mind. And here's a tip. As an Agile coach, that is something that I work on. So my challenge is to figure out how to integrate all those systems together so that we have a better experience and that I don't have engineers typing things in for no reason 4 times. So Trello is an okay Agile tool, and our OpenShift team has actually worked on a lot of automation and integration to help it talk to other systems. And if you guys are interested, the code is up at that GitHub location. So staying innovative versus setting context. So in this, what I wanted to talk about just generally is that when I started the program in fall, basically from that point forward, we've basically onboarded about 20 engineers, give or take a few. And essentially what that means is that all those people have to have some sort of base understanding of how we work together, what Agile is for the program, and where do they actually begin. And currently, we don't have anything that sets that context in writing or anything written down at all. So right now, we're working hard at setting that basic context. And Matt, this is probably where I'm talking about. So we're writing documentation that will help us actually, when somebody comes in, just find out basic things like where's Jenkins, where's GitHub, what mailing lists do we participate in, where are we in IRC, those kinds of things. So it's all right there for somebody to look at so they can get right in, right away, and understand. We're also doing some base documentation about what we expect people to understand about Agile. So at Red Hat, I said earlier that we have a general basic understanding, but not a great understanding. So what we're trying to do is provide some sort of base education for everybody so that they actually can start without actually going, why are we using Trello? Like, what's the point of that? So tip, don't be afraid to document your process, and don't let that documented process become unchangeable. So in my opinion, a process can actually be pretty lightweight and pretty smooth. It doesn't have to be like a gigantic monolithic thing that never changes. And so my tip here is that if you have a process that is gigantic, monolithic, and never changes, try to do something about that. I like to always listen to people who have feedback for the process so that I can know what to do better in the future. And I never ignore anybody. So those are some tips. And user stories. I could have spent the entire day talking about how to write a user story. I don't have that time. So what I'd rather do is basically share this. A user story is a tool, and the purpose of that tool is to encourage a dialogue both internally and externally to the tool, or to the team. Dialogue is encouraged at all steps from the initial state through to tasking. And I'm just going to share with you a quick story about how this works. So when I was on the Inception team, we had a facepalm moment with one of our user stories. I had used the term full stack in the name of the user story at the request of one of the engineers. And I just said, hey, you guys know what full stack is, so I'll just type it in, even though I really didn't know what full stack meant to them. And we got all the way through the process. We wrote the story, we modified it, added acceptance criteria, and did all the things that we needed to do to make it a perfect user story. But when we got to sprint planning and we started tasking out the user story, it became quickly clear to me that everyone in the room had a different understanding of what full stack meant. And so I had to stop the conversation right there and yank the story out of the sprint because I couldn't continue because I couldn't actually get everybody aligned on what work needed to happen. So what we wound up doing was we split the story out to represent what each individual understanding of full stack meant and actually prioritized it based on what was most important. So it's just an example of how not to use vague statements when you're writing. So time for your performance review. Here's my tip. There is no Agile police. If you hear somebody say, if you're not doing it, that's not Agile. Just smile and nod and walk away from them knowing that your team defines what Agile means for them. It doesn't have to be what a team over here is doing. Try not to say that's how it works here. If you hear somebody saying that, ask them what it is that they think is wrong with the situation or why something doesn't work that way. Try to engage them in a dialogue to maybe open their mind about maybe that they shouldn't say things like that. Don't feel compelled to have everyone in the room to make a decision. But in that regard, please make sure that you understand that if you don't keep somebody in the room when you're making decisions, that you have to bring somebody up to speed, and their feedback may change the decision that you've made. The final tip, try not to design everything perfectly before starting work. So I like to say that if you spend 6 months working on a design, at the end of 6 months, all you have is a design. So that said, there will be things that you know that need to be fully designed before you start. So make sure to identify those things early so that you actually can start them before it's too late. So this is the end of my talk, so I'd like to open up to questions. Anybody have anything they want to ask me? No? So one thing I'd like to ask all of you is that if you are aware of an open source Agile tool that you like to use, I would love to hear about it because there aren't enough of them out in the market. And right now we are using some tools that that are not open source, and I'd like to try to move away from that. So if you've heard of one, I know a few, but if you've heard of one, please come and reach out and talk to me. You can contact me at any of those places up there. And I would be remiss in not mentioning that I'm supposed to tell you to give feedback on this presentation at that link up there, which are also accessible at DevConf. And all the talks this weekend will have those links associated. So thank you.
Sparkling or?
Not actually suggested I go see this.
Okay.
Wow, what great encouragement, what great feedback to talk about Agile.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Because it's so project and not so there will be some bug missing.
I'm glad to see it again because I've had the same frustration. I've been trying to do one struggle is, we used to do Agile and I've done some of the same pushback on, no, we can't do everything because that's never going to happen. It's like I can't get everything done in this week. Well, I'm still trying to figure out how to, but it's like, well, then you need to shorten the deliverables. So maybe you all my estimate.
Hello? Hello? I can hear you.
I'm not sure. It's unmuted.
I can hear you.
You can hear it?
Yeah.
I don't. Okay. Upload the presentation slides here or?
This is what I've been telling you, boss. Your ability to estimate is very wrong, and you're like.
So I find that when you do that, if you don't do that, you can't actually show people that you're not getting as much done.
Yeah, and if you look to me from time to time, I will show you 10 minutes versus 5 minutes and all the time.
So like, every single minute, somebody bugs over something else.
Right, that was certainly the case for the organization. There's another big thing. Hi. I work in the team we go and deploy methodologies.
Perfect. Thank you.
Agile coach can, because I've seen what you mentioned, like communication problems. See this.
It was nothing but making ideas done. Oh, it was re-implementation of Kerberos. That's what
Oh yeah, read my stuff.
which I don't know.
Don't worry.
Resolution
2024 to